Thanks everybody for joining us on the Pair program. Again, this is another bonus episode of a mini series that we call How We Hatched. So today we've got Matt Theurer spending time with us. Matt is the CEO and one of the co-founders behind HyperSpectral, a startup that's using AI-powered spectral intelligence to help detect hidden dangers and gather important information in different industries like food safety, healthcare, and defense. Matt, I'm excited to have you with us today. Thanks for joining us on the pod.
No, it's my my very great honor and pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to talking to you.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's jump in here. I always like to, start these episodes with a real thought-provoking question. What did Matt Theurer have for breakfast this morning?
Aha! So I had a Canadian bacon uh, egg sandwich
Uh,
on sourdough toast with homemade pesto.
oh, man, maybe the strongest answer we've ever had on the show. Is that an everyday thing, or is this a special occasion? Kind of
Um,
treat yourself.
well, I probably have eggs and some sort of bacon far more often than my wife would prefer. Uh, um, but now I love to cook. It's a hobby of mine.
Awesome.
I try to get a little creative when I cook or make myself breakfast. This kind of sandwich is a couple times a week.
Yeah.
Other days it's oatmeal and uh, or sometimes it's a full on hash brown egg bacon kind of thing. It just depends on what I have time for in the morning. So
Sou Sounds like you geared up for this episode with a hearty start, so
I
we're
did.
we're looking forward to it. All right, we'll jump in here. So in true kind of how we hatched form, before we get into the kind of the groundbreaking technology behind hyperspectral, I always like to learn a little bit more about the journey of the entrepreneur behind the business. So always start with you telling us a little bit about your background and what led you down this path and such a unique field such as spectral data.
Sure. That could potentially be a long story. So I'll try to keep it as concise as possible. So I am an engineer by degree and by mindset. Um, always been fascinated with the how and why things work. I mean, to the point where I think when I was 9, I wanted to understand how, well, this stuff called electricity. So I shoved an antenna wire into a light socket. Um, and pretty much blew out the fuse box in the house and made my hair stand on end and smoke. And in true 9-year-old fashion, I screamed, "I didn't do it." I said it. um, no, hint. I did it. But but more importantly, I've always had a really intense curiosity as to just the how and why of the world, right? Um, and I'm always looking for these technologies, these things, if you will, that I think are really gonna alter the world in which they're applied. And that's been very early on in my entire career. So uh, we were just joking a minute ago about Microsoft technologies and the need to restart. Um, but I was one of the very early adopters of Microsoft Windows NT way back in the early '90s when the world looked at Microsoft technologies and said, "Yeah, that's really neat, but it's not going to be enterprise." Right? And I remember thinking to myself, they got a lot of work to do, but you know, these things called PCs are going to take over the world. They're going to replace the mainframes, or at least greatly supplant a lot of the work. And I think I deployed Windows NT and Windows technologies, I think, a day or 2 after it went GA, right? A little later on in my career, after I basically built a reputation as being an expert in Microsoft technologies, again, I was at a conference. It's actually, ironically enough, a Microsoft conference, and I ran across this little company called VMware, right? And, again, I remember looking at it and saying, "Wow, the product is really rough, but geez, if you've got this capability to run multiple operating systems and their attendant applications on top of a single piece of hardware, a single processor, really driving the use up and the efficiency. that's going to change the world again, right? And I jumped on very early, and the company I started was VMware's first authorized consulting company and partner. Um, and just for the readers who are not geeks like me, or I'm sorry, the listeners who are not geeks like me, um, what VMware invented, virtualization on an x86, is the entire basis for the cloud computing that we all use today. I mean, AWS is based on that concept. Microsoft's Azure Cloud is based on virtualization on x86. Google Cloud, all of that stuff is based on that. And that's what spent my career looking for, is really what's gonna really alter everything. And the scope of what these things alter has grown over my career, right? But that's what drives me, right? Is what's really going to go out there, alter the world, and solve real problems.
Yeah, it sounds like a natural curiosity, kinda is a theme throughout, your career, and, when this company you're referring to is, take it's Virtustream, is that the
So Virtustream is another company I was a founder of. So VMware kind of made x86 virtualization possible. The company I was a co-founder of, Virtustream, was a cloud provider. So think of um, again, Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure. That company we started in 2009. Um, that was actually let me roll back. The company I started that was VMware's first partner was a company called Bride Technologies, and we were just all into just doing VMware technology. We were approached in 2009 by a couple of other entrepreneurs, my business partner and I, and said, "Hey, we want to build a cloud, um, but we want to build a cloud focused on enterprise applications, right? So things that were um, or applications that were not designed to run on the cloud. We're not designed to run on Amazon Web Services. So, we need to run things like SAP or Oracle Financials or some of the big healthcare record systems, which were all intended to run in house. So we were the experts in building stuff for VMware on top of VMware, and that was the foundation. That was Virtustream, right? It was we called it enterprise cloud.
I gotcha. Okay. So I skipped it looks like a lengthy piece as well in your career, at NIH as well. So,
No,
uh,
yeah, yeah.
let's say so it sounds like your first company you started, with Bride Technologies,
Mhm.
uh, were you working with NIH in tandem, of Bride, or tell me a little bit about how this overlap works?
So I started working at the NIH when I was still a student. And I worked for their Division of Engineering Services. And I was started off doing that kind of building automation, building control systems, right? And I was really lucky. I had some great mentors there who really gave me really kind of outstanding level of freedom for a 19-year-old engineering student to have. And that they plopped a project in front of me. I was working for the energy engineer specifically on, we need to find a way to optimize um, the chilled water system. So when you look at big campuses, university campuses, things like the NIH, they tend to have a central chilled water system where they cool water down in a big central building, or in the NIH's case, is two central buildings that pumps all over the campus, and that's how they cool the buildings, right? Um, in a very hot, humid environment like Maryland is in the summer, you know, those pieces of equipment, they're called chillers, massive power draw, and they're also um, not the most efficient things in the world. So I was given the task of figure out the best way to turn on the sequence of turning these systems on, and at what load they should run to provide the maximum cooling for the minimum amount of power. And it turned out to be a very complex job. I was taking environmental data and analyzing water flows and power draw and all this. But basically, I essentially built efficiency curves, and we cut roughly $1 million a month off of NIH's summer power bill,
Well,
right? Which I was pretty happy, as a 19-year-old. No, I was under the guidance and supervision of the engineer, but they ended up giving me a job, beyond the summer appointment that I had. And I worked at the NIH throughout my college career. In fact, I ended up getting my degree under what they call a cooperative education program, which is where you have an engineering job. And then I was given a career choice kind of as I graduated. They're like, "We have a job for you," which was kind of nice. It wasn't necessarily easy to find a job in the early '90s as an engineer. Um, but these things called personal computers were really growing, and personal computer networking was still a grassroots effort in a lot of locations. Again, mainframes ruled the world still. Um, but I was given the opportunity to go work for the systems engineering group and switch over to computers at this point. And again, this is probably the first time I'm in my career where I actually consciously sat down and looked at what I thought the market opportunity was. Right. And I remember thinking, okay, personal computers growing, potential market, couple 100 million, personal computer or more in the US alone. Um, wow, that's a big market that's going to need a lot of help and a lot of support and a lot of opportunity, given what I thought I saw in terms of what they could do. So I made the deliberate choice to switch over to computer networking. And I worked at the NIH first for them, and then I left, and they brought me back as a project manager, permanent full time. And then I I wanted to spend some more time in the commercial world, so I took a job helping run the Microsoft consulting practice for a small consulting company, but in the DC area. But NIH followed me as a client, and they kept following me. And then I started my own company, and they followed me along. And finally, when we started again, we started Bry, and NIH was a client of mine all the way up. Even actually after Virtustream, we sold slash merged Bry into Virtustream. NIH followed me as a client, and I probably didn't stop having NIH as a client until 2010. So I worked in some shape or form with the NIH from 1989 to 2010.
Wow. It's always nice too when you're starting a business, having a client to already kind of teed up, right?
Oh, that took a lot of load off, and certainly made the decision because to start that company. So my business partner and I, when we started Bry, we made we sat down for probably a good year before we actually officially started the company, because we both worked for this previous company, which had been acquired in a joint venture by two larger companies, neither of whom we wanted to work for. But our former owner, our former boss, was the litigious sort, so we honored our 1 year non compete for 2 years. Um, and then we planned out what we wanted to do, and um, we started Bry as what I'd call a lifestyle business, right, where it was really just focused on, it's a small business. Let's make sure we're doing enough to do what we need to do as individuals. We were starting families, but we started it with personal checks and guarantees against our houses, I should say. So yeah, having some customers already ready to go made a world of difference in making that decision. Absolutely.
I bet. Sounds like a high risk tolerance as well. I always ask this question to entrepreneurs. Was there a history of entrepreneurs in your family? Any parents that were entrepreneurs? What kind of gave you that bug to go out on your own?
You know, I wish I knew the answer to that, because I'm going to say no. I'm the only one of my siblings who started a company. Um, In fact, my father worked for the federal government for his entire life. Well, I should say he started off working for the government of California, state of California, early in his career. But he was as a PhD in fluid dynamics, and that's where I got my love of computers and math and engineering was from him. But no, he was a government employee his whole life. He was the only person. He was the first person in his family to graduate college, let alone get an advanced degree.
Okay,
Um, but I don't know. For me, it does that curiosity has driven me in so many ways. Now, my entire family, all of my siblings, extremely curious. And one of my brothers is an engineer. The other is in technology as well, computer programming. My sister's a advanced degree in theology. My other sister was a medical technologist, and my other sister, I'm the youngest of six, by the way.
oh wow.
Um, is a lawyer. The one brother who's an engineer is also a former weapons systems officer, flew F-111s
Wow.
for the Air Force. But even as kids, we were very curious and we were constantly taking things apart, much to our mother's chagrin, right? Because we would decide we wanted the motor out of the can opener. So she'd come home and there's no can opener anymore. Or we would assemble, try to make three-wheeled bicycles out of two-wheeled bicycles. We'd build go-karts. Um, you know, we built a replica of the Starship Enterprise bridge in a closet once. Anyway, very curious, but I'm the only one who started a company for whatever reason.
So a curiosity that fueled, a number of these ventures, it sounds like. And, we kind of briefly touched on it, but, Virtustream, this looks to be a successful venture that you eventually sell. Is that accurate?
It is. So Virtustream was really the kind of the first company of which I was a co-founder, where we really went the VC route, right? Where we were looking to build the rocket ship and ride it. Um, we had very ambitious plans. So we were going to build a global cloud business to support applications that were not designed for the cloud. Again, things like SAP or Oracle Financials or other things. Um, so we raised tens of millions of dollars right off the bat, and we bought data centers and we bought companies. Um, and we started off with two data centers in the U.S. and two in Europe. Um, and then we expanded into France and Germany and the Netherlands, Saudi Arabia, Brazil, Japan, Singapore, Australia,
Wow.
and it was all around just creating a technology to service these applications that were being ignored, these legacy applications that everybody just said, "Psh, they'll never run in the cloud." We were very successful. So we started in 2009, and in 2015 we sold to EMC for 1.2 billion in cash,
Wow.
which
That's
was a good
impressive.
day. It
Yeah,
was a
it
great
sounds
day.
like a great day.
It was a great day, right? There was a lot of high fiving and a lot of woohoos going on in the hallways.
I would hope so.
And then, so we spent the next year integrating into EMC, which was an interesting, um, a whole interesting, because we were a startup. But when we got acquired, we were somewhere between 200 and 300 people,
Wow.
right? And then, the day after acquisition, EMC moved a whole lot of resources over to us, and we were suddenly somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000 people. Um, and we weren't living in startup time anymore. We were living into quarter based time, right? What are the quarterly reports going to Wall Street, because we were suddenly part of a public company.
Sure.
Um, so a lot of integration, a lot of work doing that, and 2016 Dell buys EMC, right? For the at the time the largest transaction in the technology world ever. I think it was $68 billion.
Yeah, I remember that. It was a massive
Yes, it
transaction.
was. Yes, it was. And all of the work we'd spent the previous year doing integrating into EMC, we kind of reset the counter to zero and integrated ourselves into Dell,
Yeah.
right? And for a long time, it's only in the last year or so that um, the Virtustream brand was kind of just finally completely rolled into Dell Technologies, their services arm. But yeah, we were a part and parcel of and a brand name under the Dell Technologies group, up until I left in 2018.
Wow.
Because at that point, I'd been part of a startup and running 70, 80 hours a week and all that since like 1999.
Yeah, it's
20.
always a fascinating transition. I always, we do a lot of these episodes where, I talk to folks that either came from big tech backgrounds to startups, or startups that got acquired. Now they're in a big tech, Fortune 500 environment. It's a very, very different culture. And, sometimes it doesn't sit well with folks. They get this itch, right? They start to get a little restless being in the walls of that large corporate environment. It seems like that was the case for you. I was tracking your LinkedIn. I found a fun little bio from 2018 to 2020 where it says, "Yeah, I'm open to helping an existing company start up, or I may decide to start yet another company. I'll let you know."
Yeah,
And it seems like there was some foreshadowing there because not far
that
after that,
was
you start HyperSpectral. But what was we'll get to that in just a second, but between those years of 2018 to founding Hyperspectral, what was on your plate? Were you taking some time off, or what was going on?
So I took some time off again because it had been, like I said, I needed some time to rest and recoup, and in a lot of ways, kind of spend some time with my family
Sure.
and kind of get to know them as well. Because I mean, there was a couple years in there where I traveled like 40 some odd weeks a year, um, and and I also decided that I wanted to accomplish a life goal, and I got a pilot's license
Cool.
um, during that time. But shortly after I was off for a couple of months, I'm starting to get restless, and I'm like, all right, I need to go. There's a couple things I want to accomplish. One, figure out what is that next big changing technology, and two, um, at Virtustream there were 5 co-founders, and we all had things that we were particularly good at. So we let the people who are good at things deal with what they dealt with. Now, um, I realized running a business and going the route that we had, trying to build these rocket ship businesses and raise money, there were things I needed to learn about that kind of aspect of a business. So I decided to go back and go get my master's, my MBA, during this time frame. So I went to MIT for a couple of reasons. One, not only just to get the MBA, but to get into that ecosystem up there in Cambridge, which is a lot of universities have ecosystems these days around entrepreneurship and incubation, which didn't exist when I was in undergrad, or if they did, I wasn't aware of them. But I wanted to get a hold of that ecosystem because, if you want to find technology, uh, the first names that kind of university names that come to your mind here in the United States will be Stanford and MIT,
Yep.
right? Those are the big ones. So I'm like, all right, let me do that, right? And so I I got my master's, and I started looking around. And at that point, I'm like, okay, fundamentally, artificial intelligence and machine learning are going to be, for me, the next big technological shifts. Now, artificial intelligence, at least as a theoretical concept, has been around since the 1960s, right? Um, but what lacked up until, let's call it, the last 10 years has been the compute power, literally the physical hardware computational capabilities to really drive and create artificial intelligence capabilities. Um, you know, that existed now. And I'm like, all right, I want to start. I want to do something with artificial intelligence. Now, I've also lived my life with the mantra that technology for technology's sake will never go anywhere. And the world is littered with really cool technologies that are sitting on the floor someplace because they don't solve a problem. And technology has to solve a real world problem for it to get out there and get adopted. Um, Again, otherwise it's just gonna be a really cool widget sitting on the shelf someplace.
Sure.
So I'm like, okay, AI is going to change the world, but what problem am I going to try to solve with it? And I was talking to some classmates once, one evening in a bar, as classmates are wont to do, uh, and and we actually decided to form a company um, focused on using artificial intelligence um, to affect advertising. Right? Could we dynamically change the content in streaming video so that the content is integrated into the video, but personalized to the viewer? So, I'm looking at your video stream here now. There's a picture behind you on the wall. Maybe I would see a poster for Starbucks. The person watching the same video next to me would see a poster for Dunkin' Donuts, right? Or the actor would interact with, the Starbucks or Dunkin' cup or a Coca-Cola or whatever. So AI was used to identify the locations and do all the work, angles, skew, color. Hey, is this product that we were trying to assert appropriate to the time frame? Right? You're not going to put a Cheerios box in a 1500s period piece.
Right.
Kind of. We got the technology working, It actually had some interest, and we're talking to folks. And then this little thing called COVID came along and shut the world down. Everybody's advertising budget went from whatever to zero. Uh, we're uh, we're a supply multiplier, right? In a world where demand has gone to zero, and it doesn't take an advanced degree in business to realize that increasing supply when demand has gone to zero is a quick route to bankruptcy. So we
Doesn't take an MIT degree for that one.
no, it did not take an MIT degree, that one. Um, and but then, during the pandemic, and I spent some time engaging myself with doing other work that had AI related to it. Like I ran operations for an autonomous vehicle, autonomous shuttle company. Um, during this time, but I remember thinking at one point during the pandemic that, wow, I'm sitting in a line for 3 hours to have a swab shoved up my nose, and I'm going to find out 3 days from now that I was okay, um, which did nothing to be able to get me back into work, back into kids into school, right? It didn't actually do anything for me to allow me to continue to move my life forward, right? So, I remember thinking this doesn't work. For this to work, we need to have a way to detect whether this pathogen exists, right? In this case, the COVID virus. Um, it's got to be fast. The test has to be fast. We got to be able to get the results immediately at the edge, right? Um, so that kind of inspired us, and we kind of had the blessing of ignorance of microbiology, right? I'm an electrical engineer by degree and a technologist and a computer guy. Um, but I remember we looked around, and we're like, all right, what are ways to find pathogens, where we could basically use physics and computers to help solve the problem as opposed to these traditional methods, which while highly accurate, were too slow to solve the problem. And we looked around, we were like, hey, spectroscopy, right? Now, spectroscopy as a means of identifying, let's say, bacteria. I found a paper from the 1890s. Yeah, that 1890, not 1990s, 1890s, on using spectroscopy to identify bacteria. The problem has been historically, from that perspective, that the machinery is very complex. It required very pure samples. They were suitable for a lab, right? Um, the real world, right? You need to have this out in the field. And in the real world, I'm sure you can imagine there's a lot more in a nasal swab than the COVID virus, right? So it's a very messy, noisy environment, and you have relatively weak signal to very strong noise, right? Which is traditional art. So we're like, all right, what if we can combine artificial intelligence to analyze this data, build models, and really understand the data with spectroscopy? And there's been a lot of advances in spectroscopy. Like you can now actually do stuff in the field, relatively low cost. I mean, devices that used to be, $250,000, you can now get equivalent performance for $10,000.
Wow.
Right? Um, doesn't solve the noise problem, but it does make the cost of data acquisition. We've got ubiquitous broadband, low latency connectivity to push large amounts of data back and forth. So you can now do stuff at the edge. We have massive amounts of compute to run these kind of models and process them in all these cloud data centers around the world. Um, let's try to solve the problem of rapid pathogen detection. Now, luckily, COVID, as a problem that needs testing, has gone away, right? And thank God for that. And I'm knocking on wood, and to that we don't have another pandemic. Though I will say we've had 5 pandemics since 2000. I think we had 2 in all of the 1900s. Right. So don't think that's the last one I'm going to see in my lifetime. But the problem of being able to rapidly detect pathogens, as we found out, it exists in a lot of industries, or I should say, rapidly find hazards. But we'll just start off with the concept of bacteria. Um, we started looking into what are the best places to do that, right? Well, obviously, human health, right? Hey, I've got a staph infection. Is it Is it MRSA, the antibiotic resistant version of staph, or is it the antibiotic susceptible staph in my post-operative wound or the cut I got? Um, or do I have strep throat? Do I have do I have a urinary tract infection? Right. Human health is a very obvious use case for it. Highly regulated environment, right? For good reason, with having to get FDA approval. But then as we looked into markets, we're like, hey, food safety, much, much, much less heavily regulated. There is actually no government regulation required to have a food safety test, right? Um, and the problem's growing, right? And it's growing for a couple of reasons. I mean, you could make the statement that whether it's caused by climate change or anything else, right? The truth of the matter is that there's a growing number of bacterial outbreaks causing sickness and death throughout the food supply chain. All you have to do is look at the headlines, and some really big, well-known names are having this problem. Um, but even outside of a national scale problem, I know there was a food recall, one per day, from like middle of December last year to the middle of January,
Wow.
someplace in the United States alone. Um, and that's a big problem. You also have a growing organic market, right, where traditional kill steps, use of chemicals and other things to just presumptively kill bacteria, can't be applied anymore, right? It's because it's no longer organic, right? People don't necessarily want nasty chemicals in their food. So there's a growing market and a growing problem there. And interestingly enough, a lot of the bacteria that are a problem in food are the exact same bacteria that are a problem in human health. So all the techniques and the data and the models that we've built, which we apply to food safety testing, can apply to the human health use case as well. So we get a basically get a twofer in terms of the processes, techniques, and models that we built. That's just the concept of pathogen detection, right? Now let's start to look for molds, funguses, pesticides, anything else you don't want in your food or in your environment. And then we started getting some interest from DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. They're like, hey, can you use this to solve some secure supply chain issues? Right? Where can you prove that this stuff, based on its spectral fingerprint, is what it's supposed to be and coming from where it's supposed to come from? And the answer is yes, you can do that. In fact, one of the biggest things that keeps me up at night is making sure we maintain focus because there's so many use cases where the combination of artificial intelligence with spectral data. Um, I got asked by a company contacted. They're like, "Hey, could you use this to analyze, um, you know, turbine blades in offshore windmills to see if developing, cracks?" And I'm like, yeah, I could, but I'm not going to right now because
Sure.
I've got other things I need to do. You can apply this to heavy industry, right? In coolant or oil analysis. I mean, there's all sorts of use cases for it. Quality control and manufacturing. The key for us, again, is actually not in the hardware and the spectroscopy hardware itself. It's in the software layer. Um, is every use case that you talk about, maybe I need to use one sort of spectroscopy versus another, whether it's absorption or FTIR or surface enhanced Raman or plain old Raman. There's so many different forms of spectroscopy. And there's different hardware vendors it's applicable for different use cases, but that kind of back end platform, that process, that software, those models and engines that we develop apply across all of them. So we work with multiple sources of hardware for different sorts of use cases. In fact, for the same use case, we can work with different pieces of hardware, provided that they have the same, we'll call it roughly the same set of capabilities from the hardware. Because for us, again, it's all about the software layer, and it enables a broader set of use cases. We're looking for partners who have a problem we haven't thought of that they can then leverage our software and our platform to go solve their problems.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was reading that it's a hardware agnostic solution, which is, really opens you up to so many different partners and opportunities.
Absolutely.
Uh, so just kind of like retracing that story, COVID kind of killed one business but created a new business right before your eyes, which is a
Yeah.
fascinating timeline. The it sounds like you were kind of scratching your own itch there with the idea of, slowness of COVID testing results, which is also very interesting. When you started Hyperspectral, did you or are these co-founders that you met alongside at MIT? Tell me how you kind of came about with your co-founders.
Sure. So, that depends on which one you wanna talk to. So, one of them, was actually a limited partner in one of the VC firms that helped fund Virtustream,
Yeah,
and that's how I knew him, and we got in touch that way, and we were talking about this problem, and that's how we moved forward. He introduced me to my COO and co-founder, Lauren, um, and then actually brought in one of not only an MIT classmate of mine, but was actually also a co-founder of Virtustream as well, along for the ride. Um, so have definitely leveraged the network that I've built, both from previous entrepreneurial experiences as well as MIT. There's several MIT EMBA alums, um, here at Hyperspectral, just because I mean, first and foremost, they have the skill sets we need,
sure.
to, having people you've known and work with about and know that you can work with is really important, right? I mean, startups are stressful, um, you know, uh, and take a lot of work. So having people that you already know and you trust
It's
is really
huge.
important for them to be successful.
Yeah, especially in those early stages, making those key hires, having that network
Yes.
is super valuable. So when you first started, did you focused in on human health or food health first?
So we were originally looking to solve the COVID problem, but we looked at the market and said, "All right, that's going to go away." Um, so what is the market that's going to have um, the lowest barrier to entry, that has a sufficient total adjustable market and service adjustable market, um, that hopefully, we can then basically double dip on the data, right, and use it to solve other problems, right? And
Sure.
that's where food came up as um, the most logical starting beachhead market for us, because again, we could re-leverage all the work in the data, um, for human health, lightly regulated enough that we weren't going to have significant regulatory barriers. Because I got that question a lot when I was talking to VCs. They're like, why would you pick food, right? That's a relatively low, thin margin business.
Yeah.
Uh, and I'm like, it is, but here's where we address a lot of their problems,
Sure.
lowering their costs. They can start to not have these loss of shelf life by having to wait to ship. All sorts of financial benefits to the food world. Again, low barrier to entry regulatory wise, and hey, I can reuse all this data and everything that we did to into human health. And then they're like, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense then.
Yeah, it's a smart pivot, but beyond that, right? Kind of you alluded to it briefly with a recent pilot program with DARPA. We constantly are hearing a buzz around dual use startups these days. We've had multiple founders from dual use, a lot of venture partners actively investing in dual use. Kind of previous guest on this show. Explain to me a little bit about how Hyperspectral has made that decision to expand from, maybe some of these commercial markets into government. Was it something where you were approached, or did you kind of design a team to go expand into some of these other more regulated government markets?
So so we were somewhat opportunistic in that matter, right? So we were certainly having conversations with various government agencies. Um, there's a lot of interest, whether you're talking about BARDA, which is the Biomedical Advanced Research Development Authority, or ARPA-H, which is the Advanced Research Project Agency Dash Health, or DARPA. In a lot of use cases, and sometimes overlap, um, that we could apply our technology to, right? So they've all published what they call BAA, or broad agency announcements, saying, hey, we're interested in and people to apply for grants to solve, these kind of problems. And we're like, well, check, 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 check. We can, let's pick the ones we want to go for. But also from a DARPA perspective, one of our employees had some previous history working with DARPA at a previous company, and had some contacts there. So we went in and we just gave them a kind of an overview of the technology in general, right? And it really perked up their ears um, around the potential, right? And that's really what I think these government agencies are looking for. Are, hey, this is really interesting. Maybe I don't have that exact problem, but can you apply your technology to apply this other problem we have? And
Sure.
that's what DARPA came back and said, well, could you address this problem?
Yeah.
And we took it away and thought about it, and we kind of sketched out the approach that we would take to solve their problem. We went back to them and we gave them, we're like, here's a couple pages proposal. Cut us a relatively small, what they call a flex contract, and we'll give it a shot. And that's where it's
Like a grant of sorts,
yeah,
or yeah.
yeah, it's effectively a grant, proof of concept that the technology can solve the problem, and then they tend to grow from there, right? Once
Sure.
you show, hey, yes, I can solve this problem, and then you start to dive into, we'll call it more specific uses. So DARPA has a lot of interests. Um, some of which are really interesting, but aren't necessarily commercially viable. I'm sure you
Right.
can imagine they're interested in some, say, pathogens that you would not necessarily look for. If they start showing up in hospitals, it means somebody's
It's
done
too late.
done something we really don't want them to do, kind of. But they just grow, right? As and when you've got a technology that's as broadly applicable and flexible as
Right.
all, you get, again, it's not just dual use; it becomes, you know, multi-use.
Yeah.
I mean, 'cause, yeah, we can talk about quality control, quality assurance, manufacturing, materials provenance, um, pathogen hazard detection. Right? There's so many things that we can do with it.
And that's where, coming back to your comment about staying focused is so essential, because you could easily find yourself spread so thin chasing so many different projects that before you know it, you just don't have the capability to solve all those problems. So it's a
Exactly.
it's certainly something where it sounds like you're really kind of keeping your team heads down in a couple of key areas, really proving out the technology and the solution in those areas, and expanding at a slower clip. And
Absolutely. It's all about, as I talked to one of our VCs and board members, it's a sequencing. It becomes a sequencing problem, right? Or I'd even say a problem. It's a sequencing task,
right.
right? Or set of tasks, right? You just build and build and build the technologies and build the capabilities and the layers of what you want to do. Um, and that's what we're doing.
And so I got just a couple of quick hit questions around where the company is at this point, and then we will kind of close with a fun little segment called the 5 second scramble. Have a little bit of fun with some Q&A. But tell us a little bit about like your current headcount, where you're at, funding, and where are you guys based out of? Are you hybrid, in office, remote?
Sure. So we're about twelve people. We have a couple of contractors as well. Um, we closed our Series A in May. And of course, anybody who's ever raised money from VCs knows, as soon as you go through closing, you start planning your next round, right? And so we're currently looking to do a Series B probably mid next year. That would be the goal. And we're technically headquartered in Alexandria, Virginia, which is actually where I am today. I live in Maryland, by the way. Um, we have historically been very spread out around the country. Um, we are actually concentrating a lot of our technical work um, out of the engine up in Cambridge, part of the MIT engine up in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Um, unlike a lot of tech companies today, we're not just purely software based, though that's our primary focus. That's where our value is. But we are dealing with a multidisciplinary approach, right? So, microbiology, sample collection, bacteria, viruses, funguses, molds, etc. So you need to have lab space. Um, so that's where having a facility, an incubator, like the engine, become very, very useful. And so we're concentrating up there. I do have for roles that aren't as critical to be in the same location. Like I've got machine learning folks, AI folks down in Texas, in Washington State. My chief science officers outside of LA. My chief medical officer is out of Ohio. So we are distributed, but we are coalescing around the Cambridge ecosystem right now.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, it's nice to have some central locations though, where it sounds like if it's MIT area, that folks can kind of congregate, come together, exchange ideas.
And
That
that's really important to me.
yeah,
I've always found that face to face physical interactions, right? Water cooler conversations. The hey, let's walk down the street and get a cup of coffee and chat about things. You get so many good ideas and so many aha moments come out of those kind of random interactions, that I really encourage that. And not only that, do you get these ideas, but you build a sense of teamwork and camaraderie when you actually get a break bread with people or and
right.
physically interact. That it's hard to do over technological means. Maybe that's just my age showing, right? But I have found that can't beat those actual physical interactions, right? So
Yeah, I've had a couple of entrepreneurs call it those magical moments when you're just kind of crossing paths in the hallway or at the water cooler, where something said and it leads to that next thing, and
yeah,
in the world of recruiting where we spend a lot of our focus, we have certainly seen that as an early stage startup, it's a lot more difficult to drive that innovation when you're fully remote. And I think we're seeing a lot of that coming back to office from big tech right now. And I'd imagine it'll never be what it once was, but there will need to be a time and place for folks to come together in person.
I you're preaching to the choir there.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's funny. I actually spent some time talking to my eldest daughter, especially, and her college roommate. She's a junior at CU Boulder right now, and I'm like, when you're looking to go out in the job, I mean, what are you looking for? And it's what I and I had some conversations with some other kind of younger folks entering the workforce. They don't the folks I've spoken to don't have an objection to going into the office. What they have an objection to is being told they have to and have no flexibility.
right,
And then what I'm trying to engender from a culture perspective is giving them the flexibility to do that. And I think a lot of the problems we hear about that get written up and sensationalized in the news around the battle over coming to the office or coming not could really be resolved if we all just sat down and looked at each other and said, well, what is it you're really asking for? Right?
right, right.
Finding they're asking for flexibility.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can do that.
yeah. I think that's a number one trait that startup founders are starting to realize they got to have a little flexibility to work with the next workforce here. So well, exciting stuff. We'll obviously continue to track the story, and it sounds like growth is actively happening. So we're excited for the work that you're building. We're going to transition and close the episode with a quick segment that we call the 5 second scramble. We're going to start with some questions about hyperspectral as well and the culture, and then we'll have a little bit of fun on some personal questions. But are you ready to jump in?
I'm ready to jump in.
All right. So, explain hyperspectral to me as if I were a 5-year-old.
We analyze light to find things that you can't see.
What's your favorite part about the culture at hyperspectral?
My favorite part of the culture at Hyperspectral is the high degree of trust that we exhibit in each other's capabilities.
What type of technologist thrives at hyperspectral?
The curious who always question the what and the how.
I had a feeling curious was going to come up in that answer. What are some of the top kind of tech roles, or maybe not just tech, but top roles that you're actively hiring for today?
Oh, always looking for really good artificial intelligence folks in the tech world, but also we're looking for experts in. There's a very specific field called chemometrics, and chemometrics all about the hard data that um, and the scientific data that comes out of chemical and biological interactions. So chemometricians and spectroscopy experts.
What is a charity or corporate philanthropy that's near and dear to you?
Um, wow, there's a lot. I have a soft spot in my heart for anything that affects children. Um, and also, quite honestly, I've recently started fostering a rescue dog. And Yeah, that little dog I've had for a month has wormed her way into my heart. She was found abandoned and badly wounded, and they amputated her leg, and now she's barreling around on three legs. So yeah, fostering rescue dogs is another one.
That's great. Yeah, I've got a soft spot for animals as well. And my wife and I were just talking about this about anytime we see a dog with out there on three legs, or maybe they got the wheelchair on the back. Yeah, I mean, just kind of gives you some inspiration of like, wow,
Was
that dog's pushing through it, fighting through it.
Oh, it is that the dog we're rescuing. I mean, if you did not know or could not see the fact that she's missing one of her front legs, I mean, she doesn't know she doesn't have,
Right,
right? Yeah,
right.
she doesn't allow it to stop her.
Very, very cool. Well, good on you. Briefly describe your morning routine.
Uh, so usually up somewhere between 6:30, dog out. Um, dog back in to eat. I try to grab a shower. I actually have a series of games that I actually play to start the day, like some things on the New York Times games page.
Wordle.
Wordle's one of them. Wordle connections, the mini.
Yeah,
Um, and then I like to play the daily challenges on Microsoft Solitaire. I know that sounds really dumb, but it allows me to set my mind
yeah,
and get myself kind of just how I get myself in the frame of things. A lot of times I'll take the dog for a longer walk outside in the woods someplace, and then I'm down to work, right? Cook some
yeah.
breakfast, whether it's that oatmeal or that special sandwich, and I'm off to work.
Love it. Yeah, the connections game my wife and I play it every morning. It's a good one to get the wheels turning.
It is.
If you could have dinner with any tech icon, current or past, who would it be with and why?
Oh, wow, that's not a fair question. Can I have a group dinner? Um, Tech icons, past or present? Oh, cheesy peasy. Um, I'm gonna go with Bill Gates. If I only have to give you one, I'll go with Bill Gates. If you give me a group dinner, it'll be Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, Hewlett and Packard. Um, You know, Probably Michael Dell, Zuckerberg, Sergey, uh, from Google, folks from Google, I
You
think.
got you got a full house right there.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. That'd be, Eric Schulte did be, did that might be a dinner where things start getting thrown across the table, but
Yeah, might become a
be
food
there.
fight quickly.
Yeah.
Um, okay, last couple of ones here. What is the worst fashion trend that you've ever followed?
Oh, geez, knit ties.
Okay, we know what headshot photo we're gonna use here for your
Okay.
for your episode placeholder. What was your dream job as a kid?
Oh, my dream job as a kid. honestly something where I got paid a lot of money for ripping things apart and rebuilding them into things that nobody would ever use. Right? I mean, I'm doing my dream job at this point. I don't know that I would have, when I was 11, if I would have said that's my dream, but I'm getting to do my dream job now, which is take advanced technology and apply it to problems that really affect a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. Well, that's a good note to kind of to wrap on. So I just wanted to thank you for spending time with us, Matt. Excited for the future of what you all are building at HyperSpectral, and you're an inspirational entrepreneur. So we're rooting for you all, and thanks again for hanging out with us on the pod.
Oh, I really appreciate it. Thank you. It's been my pleasure and my honor.
Take care.